Okay, guys, so this is probably the most exciting series of books that I'm going to be reviewing because we all know my love for JK Rowling. But I think this is just not the right look for today's review. So how about a little presto changeo? What? How did that happen? I don't know if that worked out, but I thought it'd be kind of fun to do a little movie magic of my own. If you can't tell, you probably can't because I clipped it back. I cut my hair! Yeah, I was like, you know what? Not into it anymore. So, I have no idea what was going on with me there. Maybe the haircut has gone to my brain. I don't know, but hopefully I'm with it now because I'm gonna need to be with it to talk about Harry Potter. I know a lot of you are like, why are you doing the Harry Potter series? That's nothing new. Well, you know what? It's my prerogative. This is my channel. I get to talk about the books I love, and Harry Potter is one of my favorite series, which is ironic considering I thought it was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard of. I was 8th grade, and my lit teacher was like, it was like closing in on Christmas break, and she really had no lesson plan for us, so she's like, I'm gonna read you this book about a wizard. And I said, no thank you, like that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. I think it took me another year to start reading the books because the first movie was coming out, and even then I didn't finish it. And then I was in college when the last movie came out, and it probably took me another 4 years to finish it. So it's really funny how I could have cared less, and now I read it at least twice a year. I think, for me, the magic is in the writing. This is an anecdote I use all the time. My mother, she looked at my bookshelves and she said, why do you have all these books? Because so many people do not reread books. But I do, and I think that's a testament of a good writer in that you want to reread their books over and over and over. Brief overview, because nobody should need to know the plot of Harry Potter. Like, you really need to get a life if you don't know about Harry Potter. Harry doesn't know he's a wizard. Hagrid shows up from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry and is like, Harry, what's up? I'm here to collect you because your relatives won't let you have your Hogwarts letter. And yeah, happy birthday. We're gonna go to the magical world and you're gonna get all your stuff for school. And then when you go to school, you're gonna make 2 really great friends named Ron and Hermione. You're gonna meet the head of the school, Professor Dumbledore. You're gonna meet your arch enemy Draco. You're gonna meet another arch enemy named Snape. Oh, but the greatest enemy of all is Voldemort, and he is the one who killed your parents, tried to kill you, it didn't work, left you with a lightning bolt scar, and there we go. Nobody knows what happened to him. However, it just so happens that 11 years later, when you go to school, he's gonna show up. But you know what the creepiest part about this is? He affixes himself to the back of one of your teacher's heads. Ah! And yeah, the whole Sorcerer Stone or Philosopher's Stone, depending on where you're from, it basically can make somebody immortal. And so Dumbledore decides to hide this stone at his school because it just so happens that he feels like it is in danger this specific year. Voldemort is like, I gotta find that stone, and in the process he's gonna cause havoc, and Harry is gonna come in contact with him again, and he has to defeat him, and there we go. There's the end of the book. Plain and simple. Or at least as plain and simple as I can make it. But let's get into it. I have to say that of the books, my favorite or favorites are the first and the last. People say, if you could only have one book, like if you got stranded on a deserted island and you could only bring one book with you, I'd be like, can I take the whole entire Harry Potter series and smush them together? I don't think I could survive with just one of them, but I think what makes me love this first book, and this is something that if you haven't noticed before, maybe you'll catch on to it now, is it gets progressively darker as the series goes on. And so what I really love about this first book is how how lighthearted, how joyful, how optimistic it is. Like, I love when Hagrid shows up at the house on the rock and he's like, "You're a wizard, Harry." And then he sweeps him off to Diagon Alley, which, if this is something you've never noticed, diagonally. Like, the way she spins words, the way she puts a play on words all throughout this series, I just think it's amazing because it's so simple. And it's one of those things when you realize it and it hits you, you're like, what? And he's swept off to Diagon Alley and he goes into the vault, or, you know, he goes underground at Gringotts Bank to get to his vault, and he sees all these wonderful things, and then he arrives at Hogwarts, or even before that. This is one of my favorite scenes in the movie, in the book. It always makes me hungry and wish I had a stack of chocolate next to me. It is when he's on the train with Ron, and he has this pocket money, and he's like, I'm gonna buy everything on the cart, even though I've never heard of any of it, because none of it is muggle or non-magical food and treats. And so I just love this idea of excitement. Like, maybe I'm weird, which actually, there's no maybe about it. I'm a strange bird. I always looked forward to that first day at a new school because there's so many opportunities. So I just love this ride to Hogwarts where anything is possible. And in the meantime, we're gonna pig out on chocolate frogs. I'm getting off track. And then he gets to Hogwarts and he sees the magnificent castle as he's coming in on the boat, and then he steps inside the Great Hall and he sees the enchanted ceiling and all of the people around him. And then up front is the enigmatic Dumbledore, this headmaster that everybody talks about, and he has no clue who he is. He has to get sorted, and I just think, I just love this, where they're all so scared. And on one hand, I'm like, let's use a little common sense here, people. Nobody knows magic. Like, why would they require you to do magic to get into a school where you're supposed to learn how to do magic? But I just think it's so funny where all of the new students, all the first years are like, oh, what's gonna happen? And then they sit on a stool and have a magic hat put on their head that tells them which house they're going to be sorted into. This is a good segue, actually, because as much as I love Harry, as much as I love Ron, as much as I love Hermione, my favorite character in the entire series is Neville Longbottom. And the fact that he is put into a house that is known for bravery when he is obviously not well suited to this house, it just says so much about who he will be. And I know I'm getting ahead of myself because we're only on the first book, but I'm pretty sure all of you have read these books. I just love seeing his progression from the forgetful little butterball who can't find his frog to, I won't ruin it that much, to the important character he becomes by book 7. I just love being able to have that 20/20 vision, that hindsight of coming back and seeing characters and being like, ah, you have no idea where you're gonna end up in 7 years. I love, basically from the point where Hagrid gets Harry to the point where Harry gets to school on that first night. There is so much magic in that, literally without any magic. That, for me, is what draws someone into a book, because it's fresh and it's exciting and you just want to know what's going to happen next. I get the tingles every time, and literally I read this book 2 times a year. So if I've been doing that for 4 years, that means I've read this book 8 times, not to mention the myriad of times that I have read it before that. I have it on audiobook, I have it as an ebook, I have 2 sets of hardcovers of this entire series. I know that makes me sound crazy. Let me explain why I have double sets. I have a read set and then I have a write set. One that I will loan out, and then I have one that I can write all of my little notes in. I should find my copy of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone and go through and see some of my earlier notes, because I haven't done it in a while. Here's my thought, here's my thought, here's my thought. So you know what? Give me a moment. I'm gonna go find it. Ready? All right, now I'm back, and I took a moment to kind of flip through and look at my notes to see, what kind of notes I made, and it was good to reconnect with my younger self. And it was just really funny to see my little writer's brain already at work. If anything else, if you are a writer, this book, it is a fantastic study in development, in characterization, just in writing. Sometimes I do get bothered that I can see her plotting. You can just see where she kind of followed along, like connected the dots. But I just thought I'd maybe share a little bit of my thoughts with you. There's one point where Harry and Ron are playing wizard chess. Now, so many of the notes that I made in here are about foreshadowing. And that's just one thing that I thought she does so well. Be it foreshadowing in this book to the very end, or foreshadowing in this book to the end or throughout this book. When Harry first meets Hagrid, and Hagrid's like, I've always wanted a dragon. And then a dragon comes into play, and it's a major plot point. Or where Ron is teaching Harry and Hermione how to play wizard's chess. Wizard's chess. So Ron comes from this really large family. They don't have a lot of money. So Ron just has a lot of hand-me-downs and is talking about how even his chessmen are hand-me-downs. But in this instance, it's not a bad thing because they know him, they trust him. And I'm like, what does it mean? Because Harry's borrowing some chessmen. And so I'm like, what does it mean that they don't trust him? Does it depend on skill? Clever, though. It's a valid question. What does it require for your chess set to trust you? Constant use? Or is it that whole magic thing where they know that you suck, and so they're going to take advantage of you? Or then there's this one where at some point in the book, Harry stumbles across the mirror of Erised, or desire, if you can read backwards. So he in the mirror of Erised, it essentially shows you your heart's greatest desire. And Harry, who is an orphan, who has never been shown love throughout his life, he wants family. And so in the mirror, he sees his family. Eventually, Dumbledore is like, dude, you gotta stop coming to visit the mirror of Erised. In any case, I'm gonna move it, and I would really appreciate if you didn't go to look for it. And so before their conversation ends and Harry scampers off to bed, he's like, well, can I ask you what you see in the mirror, Dumbledore? And Dumbledore's like, yeah, thick woolly socks. And my question is, why? It's another very valid question. Obviously, Dumbledore is avoiding answering correctly, but why socks? He talks about how everybody keeps giving him books. I'm like, what's wrong with that? Okay. But yeah, like, why would he say socks? It is not important. It's probably just a throwaway answer for Harry to get Harry off of his back, but my brain is like, well, Rowling, everything you do in this book has a purpose, so what purpose do thick woolly socks have? But yes, my notes cracked me up, because like, wow, Beth, you are so young. Yeah. Who needs a time machine when you have a book that you can write in, right? Anyways, let's talk a little bit about some things that after over a dozen readings that I wonder about, that I question. And one of them is, how many people have noticed? So Harry Potter is written in third person close, which means Harry is not telling the story. It's not like me talking to you. It's somebody else looking in who has access to Harry's thoughts and actions, and only Harry's thoughts and actions, and so then portrays the story that way. But then there are these moments. There really aren't a lot moving forward with this, but in this book, in Harry's first Quidditch match, we are right there with Harry, right? And then all of a sudden we pull back and we know exactly what Ron and Hermione are doing and thinking and what the people in the stands are doing and thinking. I think it's incredible that I honestly do not know how many reads it took me to notice that, but like, this is something you're not supposed to do. You stick in that one character's head. Yet, Rowling, in her very first book, was allowed to keep that. And it was done seamlessly. It was just natural to kind of pull back and see what the people in the stands are doing, because this Quidditch match is just so exciting. We have to know how everybody's feeling. It doesn't bother me necessarily, but it warms my heart, because as a writer, I'm just competitive by nature, but as a writer, I'm competitive with my contemporaries. I want to know what they did to succeed, and to know that Rowling is not perfect. It just warms my soul. It makes me feel better that if she can get away with some things in her first book before she'd ever proven herself, that I can do the same thing. But yeah, it was that's just something that I've noticed in this book, and it makes me go it makes me giggle. There we go. Characters. I could honestly go on and on and on about how many wonderful things Rowling does to create the wizarding world of Harry Potter. Outside of her ingenuity in coming up with magic, her characters take the cake. They make the show. And I think it's just so interesting how, depending on my mood, depending on what's going on in my life when I'm reading, I can love a character, and then the next time around, I can not stand the character. Recently, I was so annoyed with Dumbledore. And of course, this is further into the series, but I was just like, Dumbledore, why don't you just say what you mean? I'm so tired of the double talk. Just spit it out already. But we would not have a good story if everybody said what they meant, because then there would be no misunderstandings. I think it's so fantastic how abhorrent, in a sense, that Hermione is in the very beginning of this series. Can somebody be that annoying? Like, can they really be that much of a stickler for the rules that people hate them? On some level, because she is not a friend to Harry and Ron in the beginning, because she's an insufferable know-it-all. And then they save her from the troll, and then all of a sudden, all three of them are besties, which I understand. As Harry said, there are some things that you go through that you just cannot come out of without being friends. But will it really only take one instance? I mean, I guess maybe she eases up some after that, which makes it easier for all of them, but maybe that happened a little too quickly. That's neither here nor there. I love how early on all these characters, they get cast in a role, but they are not one-dimensional. They're just all so human. They have good, they have bad. Ron, I think he's great in the very beginning of this book. I think he's super funny, but he's not a really nice guy. I don't know if it's because he has so many older siblings and he feels like he has to live up to all of them, but he's pretty vicious, you know? He can say some really hurtful things, and I'm just like, Ron, I loved you so much, and now I want to hit you. And even Harry, where I'm just like, Harry, can you just hold up, wait a minute, put a little oomph in it? Well, that actually is completely unrelated to any of this. I just, was going along with the lyrics. But I'm just like, Harry, you need to put a cork in it. You just need to mind your own business for 1 minute. You are not a Hardy Board. You're not Nancy Drew. Which reminds me, I understand that the whole premise of this series is Harry needing to defeat Voldemort. But one thing that I notice, how convenient is it that Voldemort just decides to show up at Harry's first year of Hogwarts? Nobody has seen hide nor hair of him for 11 years, and it just so happens that when Harry re-enters the magical world, Voldemort re-enters the magical world? I mean, I'll give it to him. Maybe that's how long it took him to regain enough strength to find someone to get him in. But it's just a little convenient, don't you think? Guys, I'm really splitting hairs here. But talking about antagonists, Snape and Draco. I have a really hard time with Draco and really seeing him as a really terrible dude, particularly towards the end because of the movies, because Tom Felton does such a great job of humanizing him. And sure, he's an attractive guy, and so it's really hard to hate an attractive guy, which I'm sure he's not nearly that attractive in Rowling's mind, but I love how awful they are. Like, I mean, I think that's one of the most wonderful things about writing is you get to be vicious. You can be unapologetically bad because they're villains, they're antagonists. However, like I said, they're not just a one-dimensional character. They're just not bad for the sake of being bad. They are bad, but they have their own reasons. They have their own cares and worries and goals and aims. And it's like, well, maybe they're not bad because they have to be bad. They're just bad because you don't get along with them. Your personalities clash. Or Draco, you get the sense eventually that Draco is just jealous of Harry. And so that's why he's mean to him. And then that just builds and builds and builds throughout the series and blah-de-blah-de-blah. But sometimes I get really annoyed by Snape just because I love fairness, and again, back to realism, where can a teacher really get away with that kind of treatment? Does Dumbledore not step in, ever? Harry mentions in this book that he thinks that Dumbledore knows more or less everything that's going on in the school, so wouldn't he know how horribly Snape treats him? I don't remember which book it is. I think it's the 5th one. Snape almost intentionally tries to fail him. And of course somebody steps in to make sure that doesn't happen, but how does Snape get away with this? Or how does Draco get away with his horrible treatment of Harry, of Hermione, of anybody he feels like treating badly? I love them, but I also get really annoyed because is anybody ever going to step in and put them in their place? In this book, Hagrid wants a dragon. He eventually gets a dragon. And Harry and company are like, we need to get rid of this dragon, Hagrid. This is not a good idea for you to have him. So on the night that they are getting rid of the dragon, Draco learns of their plan, and then he ends up getting caught. And the punishment for this is losing house points and getting detention. And so Draco loses 50 points, but then Ron, Harry, and then Neville, who all, were out of bed because of whatever they're doing, they each lose 50, plus they get detention. So then in a later book, with all the Dementor stuff going on in Sirius Black, so Harry is horribly affected by Dementors. And so Draco, in attempt, just because he's a mean dude, but also because he wants to cause Harry and the Gryffindor Quidditch team to lose, he and 2 of his friends dress up as Dementors. But as a unit, they are only docked 50 points. Whereas in this first book, McGonagall, who's Harry's head of house, docks 50 from each. Yet, in Prisoner of Azkaban, she only docks the 3 of them 50 points total. Sometimes I just don't see how things are evening out here. As much as I love that Draco is an antagonist, because he makes Harry's life hard. And I think Harry needs that. Like, we all need something to push against. I don't quite understand why there's no fair play, or even talking about Quidditch. In this book, when Harry meets Lord Voldemort in the very end, he is unwell enough to play in the final Quidditch match of the season. So the Gryffindor team goes ahead and plays, and of course they lose spectacularly because they're missing a player. And not only are they missing a player, but they're missing a pivotal member of their team. So then in Prisoner of Azkaban, Draco, he gets injured. He is on the Slytherin Quidditch team, and the weather is terrible when they are supposed to play the Gryffindors. How is it that he was able to get out of the match, that he was able to get the Slytherin match rescheduled because of weather or because of his injury, when they wouldn't give the Gryffindor team the same consideration in this book? Obviously, Harry's out of commission. So why are you holding it against the Gryffindors? Or even, why don't the Gryffindors have any backup players? I think it's Chamber of Secrets when Snape is going to referee the Quidditch match, and Harry's like, I don't know if I should play. Like, this is not a good idea. And of course, Hermione and Ron are like, don't do it, don't do it. And then of course Harry's like, well, I have to because there's nobody to take my place. Why not? Every team should have backups. When Harry is the captain of the Quidditch team, he is able to find replacements when things go wrong. There's just little things that eventually start to add up, like you start to notice when you've read the series too many times. But back with Draco, like, why does he get concessions that Harry doesn't? Like, why is Harry punished more severely than Draco? Is it because Harry is the hero, and so he has to have stumbling blocks? Or is it because Rowling did what she wanted when she felt like it, without really thinking about continuity? I don't know. You know, these are just the things that pop in my head that hopefully are entertaining to you and make this review just a little bit different. The one thing that I wish that I could get more from all of these books is magic. I get it. They're kids. They're learning. But as kind of on the fence as I am about the Fantastic Beast movies, what I love most about them is we finally get to see magic. The extent of the magic that we see in the Harry Potter series comes from the adults, which makes sense because they're adults. They've been at this a lot longer. So we see the things that they are able to do. But we see very little about what the kids are able to do. You do get a decent amount in the Deathly Hallows, and Hermione's just fantastic. I love when she pulls out her bag of tricks. I just can't emphasize enough how much I love this series. I learn so much every time I read this book. It is a complete and total escape for me every time I step into that world. The audiobook is fantastic. It is my favorite audiobook of all time. Jim Dale does an amazing job. I completely recommend this series, whether you're listening to it or reading it. I don't know if this is as much of a hot button issue now as it was when the series first came out, but parents caused a hoopla about letting their children read it because it does have to do with witchcraft. But my thought on that is, it's not black magic. It's not evil. Yes, of course, there are bad guys in it who use their magic for ill, but on the whole, this is not teaching us how to summon the devil. This is letting our imaginations run free, and my imagination runs every single time. So if you haven't read it, go for it. If you have read it, talk to me. Tell me what bothered you, what didn't bother you, what were your favorite and least favorite parts. What are the things that you never noticed? And then all of a sudden you're like, light bulb. Let me know what you think of this review, because it was a lot harder than I'd expected. This is such a popular book that how do you talk about something everybody knows? Like, nobody wants to listen to what they've already heard. So, yes, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Stay tuned tomorrow because we're doing the lead up to Rowling's birthday, and so tomorrow will be Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I hope to see you tomorrow. Bye!